Welcome back, everybody. We now come to our first special session of the afternoon or the early evening, depending on where you are in the world at the moment. And I'm going to be able to introduce Kerem Guler and Asli Adali. And I hope my pronunciation is at least reasonably non-offensive for both names. They're from Certify. And they're going to be talking to us about remote proctoring, a subject which is caused some debate in previous conferences. So I look forward to hearing their presentation on the impact of remote proctoring on test development. I shall be back in about 20 minutes. We'll maybe take a couple of questions before moving on to the next session. But I think at this stage, over to you, Kerem.
Thank you, Jeff. Share my screen. I believe you can see it now. So, hi everyone. My name is Kerem, and thank you for joining. I'm a business development executive working at Certify Assessment Solutions. Before I start with the presentation, I would like to give you some brief information on what we do at Certify. We are a Manchester-based company that offers an ecosystem of digital solutions to universities, awarding bodies, and corporate companies. These solutions include software for the remote proctoring of tests, a platform for these online tests, a management portal for managing students, proctors, test centers, etc., and also some other modular services like a lockdown browser, a streaming service, and also a mobile app that will turn your phone into a second camera to be used in the remote proctoring process. We also have a sister company that's also based in Manchester. It's called International Testing and Training Services, which was founded in 2009. And this company provides a global network of test centers and also multilingual proctors to the major test providers around the world for more than 10 years now. As you can understand from the scope of our work, we have pretty good experience in the brick and mortar test center services, as well as in the digital side of testing, including the proctoring side of it. So my presentation is basically based on this experience. Today, I'll be talking about the impact of remote proctoring on test development and the equivalence between two testing modalities. Research has shown that there is an equivalence between the same test forms being delivered by remote proctoring and delivered in a brick and mortar test center. But this doesn't mean that it's 100% the same. Obviously, for security reasons, you must ensure that certain safeguards are in place regarding how the forms are administered, especially through the remote proctoring delivery. This means that you must structure the forms in a certain way with the breaks and everything else to mitigate the risk of cheating. And before you do that, you have to show that there is equivalence in terms of fairness and accessibility. And this is where remote proctoring is at a disadvantage. But with the remote proctoring, the first thing that needs to be done to create true equivalence is removing the technical and procedural constraints that perhaps are not present in the brick and mortar environments. What does this mean? This means that, for example, if you're in a brick and mortar environment and you have a technical problem, you can just raise your hand and somebody will come to sort the problem out for you. But if you're in a remote proctoring environment, you cannot do that. And sometimes you will have to take that burden of the technical issues yourself, and you have to become your own IT support. And that does not create equivalence. So when you select your vendor in terms of the remote proctoring solution, you have to ensure that Their procedures are in place to prepare the test takers with regard to what should be covered by the vendor. So, for example, do they allow you to check your computer specs beforehand? Maybe using a demo test before you actually take the actual test, just to make sure that you know that your computer is up to it. And all these preventive measures will make sure that on the testing day, you have a smooth and seamless experience. But the issue is not always just technical. It's the communication, the emails that are sent out, and other related communication processes. And these are some very basic but very important points to consider. On the other hand, again, in a test center, a test taker can talk and explain a problem directly to the proctor, but can they do that with a remote proctoring solution? Well, ideally, they should be. They should be able to include a two-way voice communication just to create further alignment and equivalence. Because we have seen that it can be harder to solve issues when a voice communication is not present. For instance, the platforms that we own, that I mentioned in the beginning, that we designed, are actually created after 12 years of experience in the brick-and-mortar environments. And the aim there was to basically create a virtual test center. And the voice communication was one of the first items on the checklist, because the closer the solution is to the concept of the test center, the more equivalence and alignment there will be with the test center scenario. Another very important thing to create that equivalence is the quality of the proctors. Well, generally in test centers, the proctors are the employees of that test center. So they are part of a certain structure. They have their own KPIs, their contractual conditions, and they receive in-person training as well, which means that they will manage to provide a certain level of service to the test takers. But what about the online proctors? Because let's say we have a test center in Madrid. The test takers are generally Spanish, right? And the proctors are also Spanish. So there is a certain affinity there. But what about the online ones? Who are these proctors? Which country are they from? What's their level of English? What's their level of training? Have they received the proper level of training? What's their profile? So the remote proctor should be able to give the same amount of service to a remote test taker as a proctor in a test center to a test center test taker. This is really important. Another point to consider for the equivalence is the test taker authentication. When it comes to the test taker authenticity, you can have many options to authenticate a candidate in a test center. You can have a fingerprint scan, you can have a face scan, you can recently even have a palm vein scan, which you obviously won't be able to do at home. Your test cannot be set up to do the palm vein scan with the remote proctoring, but as we are talking about the authentication and not the test itself, there doesn't need to be a standardization. Well, the palm vein scan is maybe not possible at home, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it in the test center as well. You have to use all the security means for authentication and security at your disposal for each of the two modalities. Security must be ensured in whatever way possible. So different modalities will obviously have their own strengths and weaknesses, and the respective strengths must be used in the best way possible. So they do not have to be the same. Once you created equivalence in those areas, there is also a question of creating equivalence as far as the test itself is concerned. Well, of course, working on the assumption that the candidate performance is the same or at least similar across these two modalities. In any case, you will need to standardize a test in the way that it also addresses the security issues, especially when it's delivered in the remote proctoring modality. The problem here might be, let's say, what do you do about unscheduled breaks? So if a test taker can take an unscheduled break in the test center, they should be able to take an unscheduled break at home, right? But what can happen there is they can just go into the bathroom, use another device and look up all the answers and go back and answer the question. So that will create a problem. And obviously, if you decide not to allow unscheduled breaks, then you have to do it for the test center scenario as well, continue with that equivalence. The other thing that you can do here is either within the sections, once a test taker has answered the question, they can simply not go back to the previous questions, as in computer adaptive testing. Or maybe they can only take a break once they have finished and submitted a section. But then there is the question of unscheduled breaks for somebody who is an ADA test taker in a test center and not being allowed to take an unscheduled break because of the people taking the test at home is a bit tough. But in any case, it would mean reviewing your policies, practices, and procedures, your PPPs, to ensure that they are in line with the legislation in terms of ADA accommodations. So that's something to think about very carefully. When it comes to test development itself, what we can say is if there are no security issues, you can have the same forms across different modalities. But if you have different forms, let's say you have a newer one and an older one, what you can maybe do is you can deliver the newer one in the more secure modality, for example, if it's in a test center, and you can deliver the older one in the remote proctoring modality. Because if you have a new form, this means that you have spent a lot of effort on the items and all that stuff. And if you immediately release it in the modality that is not so secure, then you are compromising it immediately. So what you can do here is, whether it's a live exam or it's a pilot, you can use it in the secure modality first. If you feel there could be security problems, you can have a deeper item bank, release more forms and more frequently with more recycling of these forms and items. Since the remote proctoring modality affords flexibility in terms of scheduling, this could give another good reason for having a deeper item bank and frequently rotating forms, because there will be a more frequent use of these forms. If you think about the item types, if you want to create equivalence, you have to accommodate the remote proctoring side of things, in the sense that if you have, let's say, an item with heavy graphics, chances are these are going to perform better in a test center environment, which will have computers with certain minimum specs. Because if it takes, let's say, 3 times longer for a remotely proctored test taker to load a question, automatically there is, again, no equivalence. So do we really need them? How are they going to look on different devices of the test takers at home? These sorts of things need to be taken into consideration. So if you are considering to have alternative item types, these need to be thoroughly tested in terms of bandwidth and also screen settings, etc., just to save the test taker from having issues and also having to scroll down to see a complete image, which again would compromise the fairness and also the equivalence compared to the test center. And obviously, questions like multiple choice will be the more inclusive item types to standardize the experience. To wrap it all up, as I said, research does show that there is equivalence between the same test forms delivered through the 2 different modalities, but it depends on the test providers and us, the proctoring platform and test center providers, what level of impact the remote proctoring will have on the test development and what kind of measures need to be taken to maximize the advantage of it. That's all I wanted to share today, and thank you all for listening. if you want to contact us, you can take a look at our website and drop us an email. Thank you very much.
Kerem, thank you ever so much for that. I noticed, if you don't mind, that there were a couple of questions. I think your colleague may have answered them on the text, but maybe you would like to put out a little bit on the subject of numbers that you can handle at any one time. I think it's a valid question. And I'm interested to how you deal with peaks, really, in activity, not so much the maximum number, but when you may get a sudden surge of activity because everyone expects a test to start at that moment.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Kerem, if you don't mind, I would like to give a few examples of these, case studies we have been experiencing in the past in remote sessions. So have to put it out there, Jeff. There are sessions that we run, extremely crowded sessions, like over 2,000 candidates starting the exam at the same time, which is an issue. Number one, for technically, of course, it's a problem for servers and everything. What you provide technically is already a challenge. And number two, those test takers are taking those sessions from all around the world. So their PC's tech specs is another challenge. The way to, go through or go around this could be having a staggered check-in, depending on the client's needs, of course. Mm-hmm. But if they're starting, let's say 9 a.m. sharp, all 2,000 candidates at the same time, it could be a big problem for the servers. However, you can try 9 a.m. starters, 9:15, and then 9:30, and maximum until 10 a.m. That's an option. That's how we can deal with these high volumes. But of course, sometimes the client does not prefer that due to, some security measures they have to take. In such cases, you have to deal with some technical problems that can be frustrating for candidates, to be honest. But you have to deal with it. And even though you try, in practice, starting 2,000 candidates at the same time at 9 a.m. sharp at the moment around the globe is not technically possible. Okay. You will still have delays. That delay, depending on your platform's technical capabilities, could be 10 minutes, could be 15 minutes, or the servers can go really down and it could be half an hour. And that will create the frustration on the candidate side. But for a healthy start, what we suggest usually is for the crowded volumes is the staggered check-in. So accept like 250 at one go and then accept the others and, assign the necessary proctors is healthier. And usually from our experience, I can say that staggered check-in method is really better for the candidate support too, because people are comfortable about the timing and everything. So they don't get, concerned about their exam, their start times, whether they're losing the time or not. This usually eliminates the time and effort if you, of course, inform the candidates properly in advance. I don't know if that answers your question.
And presumably that means that actually business continuity, business contingency is quite a large factor in your business plan. That yes. You must shadow things and do all of those issues around mitigation against the risks of, servers going down as they can do.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Unfortunately, they can. But what we believe at Certify is that, of course, there are perfect scenarios where you can draw the best picture ever for the session delivery. But then when the client comes and experience the reality, it's different. What we believe is honesty as much as possible. So we inform our clients for every possible problems they can run into, how we can go around those, have to inform candidates during these sessions is quite essential and is affecting the results actually, because there are various effects here. You have to consider your client, you have to consider your platform and your own company, you have to consider the test taker experience. various levels of concerns here you have to think about. And being 100% honest and direct and preparing them for potential negative scenarios is helping their psychology, and it's helping for a fair and smooth session. So even if they run into problems, they were well informed about them and they know what to do, and everybody's happy, even including the test takers. Because when you create a perfect scenario and when you cannot deliver it, it's a disappointment. You know, you usually get overreaction over these stuff, even though people understand, you know, that technical stuff. You provide everything. But if you think about it, my tech spec, let's say my internet speed doesn't meet the platform's needs. So it's on the candidate side. But if you don't inform the candidate about it, they usually put the blame on you, but that's not the case. But when they're aware of it, they understand something wrong with their internet speed. So they have to either do something to improve it, or they have to be patient. So they are neither angry at the institute or us, and everyone is happy. So what we see as the key element here in remote sessions is 100% honesty about potential, let's say, disaster scenarios is the key element to be successful, because there is also this trust element that we really want to, you know, keep, and it's helping a lot in growing our business and running successful sessions.
That's lovely. Thank you. We had one other question. We're down to the last 2 minutes, which was, I thought was quite a good one, is how do you assess, and I assume we're talking about monitor and view the assessors, the invigilators in the process. So 90 seconds, if you could, as the old...
Okay, 90 seconds. I'm going for it then. So 90 seconds, how to assess the proctors. Something we're very proud of is a feature we called Proctor the Proctor.
Right.
We know working from home remotely can, you know, have endless scenarios. So just like we can monitor the candidates in our platform on Invigilate, we can actually monitor the proctor too, with their own webcams and with their mobile phones. Therefore, we can assess their, number one, the actual video, and number two, on our back end, there is a report system. When they review videos, even if it's not live proctoring, we can see how many minutes they have spent on reviewing a video. So this also affects our assessment system.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and with supervisors, we have supervisors actually auditing the proctor's records. So they just compare the proctor command on the system and on the minute of this video, whether it's relevant. And if it's not relevant, that means that proctor is not performing well. So we take our notes. In a sense, we have our own criteria. Depending on the performance, we either blacklist or promote these proctors. So
brilliant.
That's how we assess the proctors.
That's lovely, and I much appreciate that. And before we move on to the next session, I and the other chairs have spent a lot of time asking questions of our speakers, and you answer them perfectly. I'm going to ask a question, maybe just to see the thoughts, see if we can get some discussion going on the chat room. We've seen a significant growth coming out of COVID. It's been a dividend. Horrible, terrible thing, but there has been a dividend. Maybe people would like within the audience just to let us know how they think that will pan out. Will we hold on to that? Will it grow more? Will it fall back? Just a thought for people, just to be interested in their, Vox Pop views on that. Use the chat room, please. Interested in seeing your feedback. And I'm going to take the opportunity to say thank you, Kerem. Thank you, Asli. Really interesting. Thank you, Certify.
Thank you, Jack.
And I'll move on to the next session, if I may. Chaired again by the irreplaceable Brian Moon. And I shall pass you over to him for this final session before the keynote speaker of the day, which stay on for keynote speakers. Good. Right. Okay, everybody. Thank you. And over to you, Brian. You're on mute.
Yeah, that's funny.
There's always one.
I was just telling you how replaceable I am. So now I'm working myself into a replaceable situation. But so we'll go ahead and get started with the afternoon and welcome our first panelists. They are both from EdCuration. We have Timeri and Christy. And they, as I said, are from EdCuration, and I will allow them to proceed as soon as I thank them for all the support they've given us over the past year at Sarah Learning Assessments. I can assure you that their staff are terrific, their service is invaluable, and hopefully that's a good setup for their presentation. So I'll turn it over to Timeri, the CEO of EdCuration.
Thank you, Brian. It's wonderful to be here today. Can you all hear me? My headphones are a little off today.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Fantastic. It's wonderful to be here. So excited. I'm excited to share a little bit with the audience about EdCuration and our marketplace and some of the assessment resources that we've curated to support assessment in schools. And particularly our lens is probably a little more on formative assessment than summative assessment. And that is related inevitably to my background as an educator. And so I'm happy to share that with you all. Let me share my screen. Let's see, here we go. Wonderful. So I lead EdCuration now, which is a marketplace for instructional resources. But before that, I started my career as a middle school English teacher. I taught English language learner students. And then I became a school and district literacy coach. And after that, I grew, and then exited from the English curriculum company called Inquiry by Design. And I have to tell you that through all these experiences of working in schools, working in district offices, selling curriculum to different districts across the country, I'm embarrassed to say that I could never probably say with confidence that I knew which students in my care were struggling with the content and why they were struggling, nor did I always know what to do for certain about the students who were struggling. And when I reflect on that, it caused me to think back this morning as I was thinking about this presentation, that it was in my 7th year of teaching that I first learned the term formative assessment. I don't know if it wasn't popular in the 90s when I started my career or what, but how is it that I was successful in education? I was advancing and getting promotions to department chair and all of this. And I managed to do the work for 7 years without anyone teaching me, an English teacher, what formative assessment was and how essential that it was. I even earned my teaching credential in the traditional way, right? Through a University of California school. And we didn't focus on formative assessment, which just shocks me now as I think back to it. And I remember when I did learn about formative assessment and how essential it was for making sure that my instruction was meeting the needs of all the learners that I was in charge of, that I started implementing exit tickets every day, right? That's something every teacher can do. And as an English teacher and a writing teacher, I also started implementing a writing practice that included having students share their writing daily with others and get feedback. And so on my own, I started implementing some formative assessment practices to have a better sense of which students were understanding the material and which students were not. But never in what ended up being 12 years in the classroom for me was I ever provided a formative assessment tool to use with my students that were purchased for me by my school or my district. It was just up to me to create, some systems for doing that. And so I'm excited now to have the opportunity to be on the hunt for those solutions that I wished I'd had and to bring them onto the EdCuration marketplace. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. I started EdCuration to be able to make it easier for educators throughout the country, whether you're a teacher or an instructional coach, which is a job I had and loved for a long time, a school principal or a district leader, to have one place to go to shop for all your instructional resource needs. At EdCuration, you can search for materials by subject matter or grade level, by core or supplemental, by EdTech tools, and compare them and have one place to kind of go to do that all. And so, of course, assessment is one of the subject areas that we look for meaningful resources to have on our marketplace and to share with educators. And so I'd like to show you a little bit about how EdCuration works and some tools that I wished my schools or districts had bought for me when I was a teacher that you might like. And there's a lot more. I'll probably just share 3 today, but there's a lot more that you all can investigate in your own time. So this is EdCuration. And this is the homepage. You go to edcuration.com and you come and you can search by all these different subject areas. But today we're talking about assessment. You can pick grades. Right now, we have early childhood through 12th grade solutions. In the future, we will grow into higher education. Right now, it's pre-K to 12th, and you can search by the types of resources that you want as well. And then you hit browse. And we have right now 52 different items that offer assessment solutions. And to really drill down, I recommend that you pick the trending assessment tools here. And Xero comes up first. And what I love about Xero is that when I was a teacher, I did use concept maps. That is something that the School of Ed taught me. But I love the idea of doing it with technology versus when I was having students create concept maps with paper and pencil, because you inevitably run out of room, right? The students are trying to make connections between the concepts that they're learning, and they need more paper to be able to do it. And so the technology base is a great use of technology. And in addition, I can't say that I was well skilled in how to use concept maps for assessment purposes. I used it more for learning purposes, and I didn't use it all the time. And I think if I had access to Xero when I was in the classroom, the students would have been benefiting from both being able to show what they know in an alternative way through the concept maps, but they also would have been learning at the same time. And I believe my middle school students would have taken the concept mapping further. I also really appreciate Xero's focus on professional learning. And so there's so many videos that they offer on their website to really train educators up, whether they're school leaders or classroom teachers, in how to use the tool and concept mapping for assessment purposes. And I think building that into the way students learn gives them a way to show what they know and a way to learn new material that they encounter as they progress in their academic career. So I just love this solution. On the Xero page at EdCuration, you can watch a video, you can connect and talk to the Xero team directly. You can even schedule a demo from someone on their team. You can go directly to their website. You can download a white paper about the solution. You can inquire about a pilot if you'd like to pilot it first, although it is a free product. And so you can just get in there and get yourself access for free. If you've used Xero in the last 2 years, we would love for you to rate it. Let's come on EdCuration and share what you would give it out of 10. How likely are you to recommend this product to another educator like yourself? And then we share those ratings and reviews with other users. So that's Xero. If I like Xero, I've already made a little heart, but I can save it to my favorites, and I'll show you how that works in just a second. For some other solutions that I would like to share, I'm also a big fan of one called Bloom Sites. Bloom Sites is it's a student survey that schools can ask students to take on whatever, however much frequency they want the students to fill out the survey, whether it's daily or weekly or up to you. But it really gives it's aimed at checking in with students' social, emotional well-being, right? And the students get to identify how connected they feel, who are their friends on campus. It helps give the educators a sign about whether or not bullying is taking place on campus and to what extent, how much students are feeling connected versus socially isolated, and which ones need some extra support from the school counselors or from their teachers. It really just gives a dashboard into students' emotional well-being. And knowing that this product exists now, there might be others. I don't know of others like this, that there may be others, but this is the one I know well. I just can't imagine running a school without a tool like this now, right? With all the problems that we faced, it just seems absolutely essential to have visibility into how students are doing. It seems to me like it would be irresponsible not to have a solution like this on campus. So on the EdCuration website, you can hear from Christy Chappell, who is a school counselor and has been using Bloom Sites for 2 years, and the way that their campus uses it. Again, you can connect right with the company and have more downloads and inquire about a pilot as well. You can also, for Bloom Sites, you can generate an instant quote. So however many students or teachers that you'd want, you can fill out this information, generate a quote, and you can even place your order right through EdCuration. And for the programs on our marketplace that are for sale directly, that allow you to generate a quote and place a purchase, all EdCuration customers always receive 10% off. So if you use Bloom Sites, we'd love you to rate and review it. I'm impressed with the visibility that this gives to student well-being. And the last solution I wanted to show you was one that I've really loved as a former English teacher. So Parlay Ideas is an EdTech tool that allows students to, the teacher and students together, to track their class discussions, right? So as a former English teacher, I spent a lot of my time learning how to facilitate meaningful academic class discussions about texts and content that we were learning. And Parlay Ideas would have helped me do it better and faster, and it would have given students some visibility into who was participating in the conversation, who was not, and provide some reflection on the class discussion opportunity to help the class kind of congeal faster and really take responsibility for inviting the quieter students to participate. So I think it's just a great tool for any secondary, maybe some elementary classrooms that are really trying to facilitate academic discussion for learning. As you search for programs on EdCuration, I was showing you how you can heart them, and then you can view your favorites here, and you can compare them against each other. And it can let you know some of them, of course, in specific content areas will be aligned to standards. They'll share with you the cost for these solutions right there. And as these programs collect evidence about their effectiveness, we invite them to upload documents, and you can read about their evidence there. So this is EdCuration. I'm trying to see how much time do I have left. Not much. So we would love to have you come and use EdCuration to search for the assessment solutions that you need, and any other instructional resources that you need. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about a few other programs that educators love. One is our explorations. These are micro-professional learning for educators. They're all an hour or less, little mini courses that provide educators with a certificate for continuing education credit. We also have a podcast where we interview educators about the instructional materials that they love and that have made a difference for their students. And so you can learn about these resources from actual users as well. EdCuration, the use of EdCuration is free to educators always, and we hope that we're making your search for formative assessment tools easier and getting better resources into your classrooms faster. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's very exciting to see all the growth. And I was also thinking we should get you connected with Ed Metz from the Department of Education, the SBIR program, because you're providing that continuing platform for those developers of new technologies to reach the folks that we all want to reach. So great stuff. And if you'll just hang on, we'll do some questions at the end.
For sure. Thank you.
Yep, sure. Next up, we have Kevin Franke, who's the lead assessment strategist at Western Governors University. And Kevin's going to be talking to us about designing for parallelism in computer-scored programming assessments. So, Kevin, you are up.
Hi there. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you. We cannot see
Terrific.
you.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and I suppose, let's see, start video. Oh, hey, that's my face.
Yeah, we're good to go.
And I will share my screen. Should be pretty straightforward here. And then I think if I hit F5, is that going to do it? There we go. All right. So I'm Kevin Franke. We will have a special cameo by Weird Al Yankovic in this presentation, just a little teaser to keep you interested. So a question I ask myself on a frighteningly regular basis: who am I and what am I doing here? So I'd like to talk to you about, oh, that's who I am. I'd like to talk to you about designing. So you know, the presentation is, I guess, split between some assessment tools and technology that we've been working with and experimenting with. And the other half of the presentation is going to be about design strategies. So, okay, so that's my face. So just quickly about Western Governors University. We are a fully online nonprofit university. We offer over 60 bachelor's and master's degree programs for teachers, health professions, IT, and business. Primary students are adult learners continuing their education and advancing their careers. Our model is completely self-paced. And what that means is advancement through the degree program is defined by demonstrating competency. And demonstrating competency is defined by passing high-stakes summative assessments. My career at WGU has been primarily in assessment development, although recently I've transitioned to a strategic role. One of the main problems, strategic problems we're trying to solve at WGU is how do we deliver high fidelity and high validity assessments at scale? So, well, we'll get into what exactly that means. So our bread and butter types of assessments are two main categories. So we have objective assessments, your typical multiple choice test, and we have performance assessments, which are similar to maybe like an end of course project, but it is high stakes, right? So students have to have their task evaluated against a standardized rubric, and it has to meet all of the performance criteria that we define. So I think both of these modalities are very good at what they do. You could see some of the benefits and drawbacks that I've put on there. Really, I think the conflict I'm setting up here is, fidelity versus validity. So, your objective assessment is amenable to psychometric analysis, and we know lots about it. We get lots of information from it, but a lot of times there's a perception that it is not what students will be doing in the real world. And that's what performance assessments are very good at. But what they make up for in their fidelity, they lose in sort of the cost to evaluate them, the time to evaluate them, and they're, psychometrically just not as informative as objective assessments. So we have dreamt up this idea. I'm sure, we're not the only ones, but machine scored performance tasks. That's the dream, that's the vision. And we have found a partner in just that in Zybooks, and they have been developing an assessment platform that machine scores computer programming performance tasks. So lo and behold, students have the opportunity to demonstrate competence in programming by actually programming. And instead of them writing a program over the course of how long and then submitting it to an evaluator, this is in a proctored environment. It is machine scored, they get results immediately. And it's dichotomously scored, but solutions can vary. So there's multiple ways to approach the correct answer. So there's, this is addressing originality concerns. An assessment breach is not going to necessarily break the entire assessment. So I'll show you a few examples of what it looks like in the platform. So students are given an assessment prompt. This is an example from one of their public-facing labs embedded in the course. So I'm not revealing any top secret information here. And so this one is very basic programming in Java, and it's about printing out text according to certain specifications, right? So in this one, they have to get all the text correct, and they also have to have these two leading spaces. Students have a coding module, and that's where they write their program. They have an opportunity to test their program output. This is in the assessment platform itself. So they write the program and they run it and see what it spits out. And if it doesn't match what the expected, what's expected from the prompt, then they can rewrite their code and tinker with it. And then on the back end, assessment developers can build a solution code. This is what is going to give the expected output. And then we run the student's code against test cases. So these are two examples. One is, in this case, there is no input to the student program. It's just a print statement. In other cases, the programs can have an input, and the student submission is graded against what the program actually outputs. Okay, so now the design portion. Designing tight constructs. So what do I mean by that? So for our typical objective assessment design, we are competency-based. Competencies are sort of the bedrock, the starting point of our curriculum and assessment development. And the challenge facing our assessment developers is to understand the content domain and then define it in an assessment blueprint and assessment design documents so that they can be used to write specific test items. So to put some context to it, let's just assume it's an anatomy and physiology assessment, and the content domain evidence statement is the digestive system. So you could see there's a lot of components to the digestive system. Go figure. You've got your stomach and your esophagus, the tongue, pancreas. My favorite is the duodenum. And so when we develop our assessment design and we start writing items, any of these items align to that content domain about the digestive system. But once we've written all of our items, we run it through beta testing where we gather live data and assemble our forms. And look at that. The stomach and the tongue and the duodenum have ended up on our pre-assessment, while our esophagus or the liver, pancreas ended up on form A, and colon, pharynx, and small intestine are on form B, right? So you have these differences in the actual content of the items showing up on different forms. So the point I'm trying to make is psychometrically parallel forms. After we've run our beta testing and we've built psychometrically parallel forms, they don't necessarily, they're not perceived as parallel by our students. So they take the pre-assessment, they get items on the stomach and the tongue and the duodenum, and they think that's what I have to study. And then they see items about the esophagus and the colon, and they feel sort of bamboozled. So really, this is a design challenge. It's about defining a construct, and it's about thinking about our students and thinking about giving them a very fair testing experience. Okay, so what solution have we come up with? We coined the term surgical parallelism, and that's where we see our pal Al Yankovic. And so I guess what we mean by this is the intentional design and development of our items to achieve parallel forms. So it's a different approach than sampling from the content domain. We're really thinking from the beginning, how do we build forms that are not only psychometrically parallel, but perceived as parallel? Okay, so I'll walk you through that process. So we're gonna build our assessment blueprint. That's sort of those design documents up front. We're going to author or select a parent item. I'm going to author item variants from those parent items, run these items through functionality testing, and then beta test. So on the assessment blueprint, we start by defining the evidence that the student is producing as a result of taking the assessment. So evidence-centered design is sort of the theoretical framework we're working with here. So an example here is the learner writes a basic Java program. What are they doing? And what does that program do? It displays an output in a specific format. Then we want to identify the core programming skills that build up to those competencies. So if we take apart this evidence statement, what are they going to have to do? Well, they have to use system.out.println, and they have to properly display special characters, the space character, and symbols. And then we want to determine how many items to write for each evidence statement. And this is where we are sort of breaking with some of our typical design precedents. So we're going backwards from existing data and knowledge on student satisfaction and face validity. And what am I talking about here? You know, we don't want students to be sitting for 6 hours taking a programming assessment. It's just too much. So before we start developing any items, we have to get an idea of how many to develop and what does a good form look like, how big is it, and so forth. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Okay, so once we've got our design, you want to develop your parent items. So in our case, Zybooks already had lab activities that we could use as the point of origination for our item variants. So this was our previous example. And this was really helpful for our design and development team, as it sort of eased the burden of having to write novel items. So what we did was we focused on cloning those items, making variants of those items. And an additional benefit is the students going through the course are taking these labs and understanding how does this platform work and what are the expectations, what are the types of coding skills that I have to be good at. Then this is really where all of the work is taking those parent items and rewriting them as variants. So instead of a no parking sign, we asked the students to output a specific design of characters, maybe like an X containing 10 X characters in each diagonal, and there's specific spacing that needs to be put in there. But we continue to incorporate those core programming skills. We have to rewrite the item prompt, the solution code, the test cases, the whole gamut, right? So it is actually a lot of work, even though all we're doing is creating a variant. And the whole point here is we want exact construct alignment with the parent item, but the content has to be different to make them unique items. Then we run the items through functionality testing. So this is a step that we don't typically have or need with our typical multiple choice questions, right? So we need to make sure our solution code produces the expected output. We need to make sure that any variety of test cases that the student might input are translated into the correct output. Really helpful in this is staying organized. So I'm shouting out one of my teammates, Brett, for really helping that on this project. Unless we do beta testing. So I really wanted to present on the results of our beta testing, but we had some production setbacks. But really what we want to look at, what we're expecting is the cluster, the little triplet of item variants are very tightly aligned, right? So if the tester gets the first one wrong, they should also get variant 1 and variant 2 also wrong, right? So you want to see that they're measuring the same constructs. Okay, there are some limitations. Like I said, it requires some additional assumptions at the design phase. It's really hard to say how many items should this test be, but you know, if you think creatively, use existing experiences, I think you can narrow it down and then let your beta testing guide the rest. Construct definition is just going to be difficult no matter what, and we're just taking a different approach on this particular project to try something new. It's vulnerable to poor performance. All right, so I see that I'm just about at the end, so I want to thank my WGU colleagues for working with me on this project. I want to thank Zybooks, and I've included contact information in case you're more interested in their assessment platform. And I want to thank you for your attendance and attention. I do have a few discussion prompts. If any of these pique your interest, I'd be happy to talk about them. They're really selfishly motivated. I'm curious how others define constructs when designing assessments, and I'm curious how others use item variants in their own item banks, and I'm open to any feedback or ideas. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. That was great. We're going to save those discussion points to the end. I have a couple to add myself, but we'll bring you back after the next talk, which is actually going to be a review of some activity that's been going on with the eAssessment Association, who are a UK-based but global organization that is committed to promoting and supporting eAssessment all over the world. And just a quick shout out, eAssessment Association, their annual conference or question was one of my first forays into this field. And so I've appreciated all the hard work they've done to promote not only the emerging technologies, but the industry as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce Paul Muir, who's from the eAssessment Association, and he's going to be joined by a couple of award winners, Dee Arp and David Neville. So Paul, I'll let you make the broader introductions, but you are free and clear, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brian, and good afternoon or good morning or good evening, wherever you are. So my name is Paul Muir, and yeah, I'm the vice chair and currently a board member of the eAssessment Association. My day job is at the British Council, and this year we were the sponsors of the 2022 International eAssessment Awards, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So as Brian says, we're a not-for-profit membership body with three major goals. We provide professional support, an opportunity for debate and discussion across the sector. We sort of create and communicate positive contributions across that technology makes to all forms of assessment. And I know this year, one of my passions has been around sort of the digital divide and making sure that that doesn't become wider as everyone's moved very quickly towards digital assessment through COVID. And also to look to develop statements of good practice for suppliers and consumers of these assessment technologies. And that could be anything from remote proctoring, technology-enabled assessment, and things like that. We're a growing organisation. We've got just under 3,000 members. We have 17 board members, of which I'm one, as I mentioned already, and 31 sponsors. So we're a growing organisation. We've got broad cross-industry participation. That's really, really important in the work that we do. and as I said, today we're going to hear about two of the winners from the International eAssessment Awards that took place in June of this year. We had 10 categories, which is our biggest number of categories ever, 28 independent judges, of which I was one. And I know the standard and the quality of awards that people were taking part in here was significant, and very, very worthy winners. And obviously lots of companies who were disappointed, but also were phenomenal entrants to these awards. And as I said, we're going to hear from two of our winners today. Art from NEBOSH, who was winner of the Best International Implementation Award. And then after that, we'll hear from Neville from Nurture, who was winner of the Best Formative Assessment Project. So Dee, I'm going to pass over to you, and I'm going to be your slide genie for this section. So Dee, up to you.
Well, thank you. Delighted to be here, and really grateful to the association for the award scheme and getting us to be able to share our project with you all here today. So the next one, please, Paul. Thank you for moving these on for me. So just a very brief overview of who we are and what we do. We are a UK awarding organisation. We've been that since 1979, and we specialise very specifically in health, safety, environmental and wellbeing qualifications. And we do deliver through our network of learning providers, our learning partners. We deliver across the world, UK and internationally. And we're very proud to say that we are relevant, respected across the world due to the accessibility of our qualifications. We work to deliver our charity aims. So we are a charity regulated by the Charity Commission in England and Wales. So all the qualifications and the learning that we deliver via those qualifications needs to meet our charitable objectives, which is really all around high quality learning and education. And because of the nature of the qualifications that we deliver, it's about making sure we put learners in workplaces around the world that are going to make a difference in those workplaces and ultimately protect people's lives, safety and well-being. So to achieve that worldwide access, we have a network of about 500 learning partners in about 140 countries. And certainly in the last 10 years, we've seen a huge shift from what was originally about 30% international to 70% UK to almost flipping that around. So now the predominant number of our registrations are international, and that's mostly at the moment India, Middle East. Next one, please, Paul. Thank you. So where we were before the pandemic, which seems an incredibly long time ago now, back in March 2020, when the restrictions that came with the pandemic across the world really hit the UK, we were predominantly delivering our assessments in invigilated venues. They were predominantly structured response format questions, closed book, and we had very, very little, almost next to nothing e-assessment. It was on our radar, it was in our strategy, but it was slow in its implementation. So that put the organisation literally in a crisis state. From an organisational point of view, our registrations pretty much stopped, went off a cliff. From a learner point of view, they were not able to continue their learning journey. They were not able to complete their qualifications because we couldn't deliver on those endpoint assessments. So we needed a solution, and we needed a solution really rapidly. And we certainly weren't alone in the education and assessment sector in the UK, and I think in many areas of the world as well. The next one, please, Paul. So as I said, we needed a really fast solution and an agile solution, and we needed that solution in the most pressing of times. So all of the members of staff that were predominantly office-based were now working at home. We were going through furloughing, we were going through redundancy programs because of the worldwide situation. So what the organisation actually achieved was pretty phenomenal, and I've never been more proud to work at NEBOSH. We set ourselves a mantra to be able to deliver the assessment for our highest volume qualification, to deliver that to any learner anywhere in the world, wherever the restrictions were impacting. And that has become a mantra that we've carried forward since the challenges of the pandemic. So we started by looking at, right, how do we change a structured response question paper to an accessible assessment, but still keep the same assessed content, because what we didn't want to do was disrupt our learning partners, our learners anymore, and bring out an assessment that required a different learning journey or different preparation. So we did that by introducing an open book examination that assessed exactly the same learning outcomes, but just in a very different way. And we worked with our regulator very early on to make sure that we could optimize that solution as quickly as possible. And the regulators at this point were working with many organizations to deliver what was mostly interim solutions to the pandemic challenges. We took a decision quite early on that we were going to take this opportunity to introduce a permanent solution to our assessment methodology that would allow us to improve upon it. So the core of the improvement was that we were able to move away from some theoretical questions that were the nature of the structural response question paper to a much more vocationally applicable assessment. So by moving to the open book examination, where learners could access the course materials and the internet and other access that was relevant, and ask them questions all based on a real life case study, and absolutely make sure that when we structured those questions, they couldn't be answered just by cutting and pasting or accessing the internet. We could actually then make sure that we were assessing not just the knowledge and the understanding, but the ability to apply that to that scenario. So we set ourselves quite a tall order, and that was to deliver a brand new scenario and question set for every sitting of that assessment. So we started this process in May of 2020. And we put our first assessment solution out in August of that same year. And we did that with a relationship with an e-learning partner to deliver on a Moodle platform access to that assessment. And within a couple of months, we, again, on phenomenal timescales, we got the regulator approval to deliver that. So the next one, please, Paul. So where we are now with that particular assessment, as I said, the first assessment went live in August of 2020. We had about 8,000 learners access that first assessment window, which was a 24-hour window. Because it was the first time we'd done this, we didn't want to put any burden on our learning partners to support learners. So we had 24-hour technical support on that system. And literally any learner anywhere could access that assessment with a mobile phone or laptop or whatever was convenient for them. And the other benefit of this online assessment and the Moodle platform was for the first time we could actually mark online. So prior to this, we were shipping the assessment materials out to our learning partners. They were shipping the scripts back. We could only use examiners that were based in the UK because we didn't want to send them out again to examiners. So it's improved our reliability. We're able now to get examiners who can mark in the language, because previously we were getting the scripts translated into English for examiners whose first language was English. So many additional benefits came from making this assessment accessible as an e-assessment format. One box we had to tick with our regulator, and quite rightly so, was the authenticity of the learners. And we did that by adding on, not part of the formal summative assessment, but as an additional quality check, the requirement for the learning partners to conduct a closing interview or the equivalent of a professional discussion with every learner that had sat the assessment. So we provide a question set for those learning partners. They do an ID check on the video call, and then they take the learner through a series of questions that deep dive into the responses. So the learning partner has access to that learner's script, and it allows a judgment to be made on the authenticity of that learner. So it's one of the very many measures we've got to address malpractice issues. And the next one, please, Paul. Thank you. So this has meant so much. I mean, not least, it not only allowed our organisation to survive through an incredibly challenging period, it's actually allowed us to thrive. We keep waiting for that drop off in registrations. We thought there would be some COVID lag, but we're still seeing 8,000–9,000 learners every sitting, which is once a month for this particular assessment. There's additional benefits in the environmental impact, the reduction of paper and printing that I mentioned. Learners, as well as environmental benefits, the safety element, they're not traveling to what was quite substantial distances sometimes. So sometimes a learner from India will be traveling to a venue in Dubai. So great benefits in the safety and environmental side of things as well. security of our assessments. One of the things that used to keep me awake at night was what happens if a learner's completed a script, they're shipping it back to us, to our printing partner, and it gets lost. We don't have that as a risk anymore. Another benefit via that closing interview piece is the learning partners have contacts with the learners, so they can do some review on where those learners are and how they found the assessment. And it's given us more appetite for more e-assessment, more digitization. And I think that's nearly my time up. But yeah, we're looking at that same approach for future qualifications and also revisiting our existing qualifications and assessments. So we were delighted to be recognised for that huge piece of work. Paul, thank you.
Thanks, Dee. And I think I was actually one of the, I think I was one of the judges for, chair of the judges for your section of that. So no, we were really impressed. I think the big thing for us when we awarded this to NEBOSH was the fact they didn't just do a lift and shift. It was a huge change in the most stressing of circumstances, and that was one of the things that really impressed the judges, and it was successful obviously as well. So yeah, I think huge congratulations again. And I'm going to pass over to David.
Thank you, Paul, and lovely to hear from you too, Dee. Folks, it's brilliant to be here, and I'm glad to be the last one before you get to the Q&A, so all those questions that people are saving up get to start coming out. I'm joining from Ireland, so the far side of the Atlantic for the US audience, but the closest of the countries that side of the Atlantic to you guys over there. And very quickly, what I'll take you through is a quick background to ourselves at Nurture and some of the reasons maybe that it was mentioned why they chose us, and we're really proud to be chosen as the best formative assessment project at the eAssessment Awards during the summer. So as a very quick introduction, my co-founder and I, Porrick, we started a not-for-profit back in 2017 that supports students from less fortunate backgrounds and progress on to further education from secondary school or K-12. And we've done that based on the human connection between teachers and learners and how we can foster that. And Nurture was an extension of that, how we could see the ability to put what we learned, the research practices and our software in the hands of teachers globally to extend that mission as well. So if you wind back to one of the starting points, what we saw in terms of the challenges that teachers face in the classroom, in the part of the world we are, an average class size at second level or post-primary tends to be around 25 students to one teacher, which makes it exceptionally hard for teachers to work with students on an individual level within the classroom. But we know how effective that can be and the impact it can have. That 98% of students who receive personalized instruction perform better than traditionally taught students. So in a scenario like that, how can we unlock the possibilities and the effectiveness of something like this in that online setting? So when we look at what we do, we always think about how we can help students come first, and we want to help teachers focus on that really high impact piece that they do, which often comes to the feedback aspect of the assessment, and that's where we focus on from our end. And we do that, I suppose, when we talk about the simplified version of Nurture is about closing that feedback loop. We simplify assessment and feedback for schools, colleges, and universities. So that's a kind of quick background in terms of who we are and what we try to do to support the organizations we work with. I'm going to touch on some of the things that make us a bit different, but I think it's really important to reference some of the research and the work we've done behind the scenes. For example, Dr. Stephen Komsky, who created our first framework on assessment in an online setting, has joined our team, and he's part of our Director of Teaching and Learning now. We have a PhD that's ongoing through the School of Education in the University of Limerick, where I'm based here today. And we partner with a number of large integration partners such as Microsoft and Google when it comes to Microsoft Teams and Google integrations with my Google Classroom. And a huge moment for us, I guess, was being recognized as the eAssessment Awards, and it's helped to put us onto a global scale in terms of those we've spoken with now who've informed our practice. We had, for example, the very famous Dylan Williams on a recent webinar with us for our audience, which was really exciting. And we've some really strong outcomes in terms of what we see the impact being on the learners and how this is being applied from special education needs schools to secondary schools to multi-academy trusts to universities. There's really a broad application for how the Nurture framework can apply to help teachers and learners. And I've purposely jumped to this point because I think people might be interested here today to hear about what makes Nurture different and what might have resonated with the judging panel at the eAssessment Awards. And a couple of things that we do differently, and I talked about it earlier, the research being a really core part of what we do and how we embed that into the practices of what our teachers and students do. So the first thing we would do was that we capture student confidence with every submission. We know how important it is from a research perspective, the difference between a student who has very high confidence but has performed poorly versus a student who is low in confidence and has performed really well. The teacher being aware of that allows them to give more effective feedback for that particular group of students. Another thing we do is that we embed those research frameworks behind the scenes. And a teacher described this really well to me recently. She said that, I love the fact that I'm being guided by the research without being conscious of the research. So some of you here today might be familiar to see this is coming from Hattie and Timberley's work, looking at task level, process level, and where to next. We help teachers structure their feedback in that manner to produce really high quality, engaging feedback, but in a way that's more simple for teachers to navigate as well. This leads then, and this is probably the most common one we hear of why this resonates on the teaching side, is when you give feedback, the most common problem we hear is that we don't know if the students have even taken that feedback on board. How do we show that they're engaging with that feedback, that they're taking the learnings on so they don't make those same mistakes again? And we do this by closing the feedback loop, and student reflection is a really interesting way of how we see that happening. So for example, when a student does get their feedback, they have to reflect on that and they have to answer a couple of questions. So for example, we might say, tell us 3 things you've learned, 2 things you found interesting, 1 question you're still left with, and only then do they unlock their grade or their score. So a lot of people would be familiar as well that when you give a score or grade, you elicit that ego response, and instantly a student's ability to take feedback on board substantially drops. So we've built in ways and mechanisms to help students build a healthier habit around feedback and also get more from the work the teacher is doing as well. And last but not least, this feeds into a more full picture of our students' progress over time as well, where scores are associated with confidence levels, feeding into an engagement score that looks at things like, are they submitting work on time? Is their confidence increasing or decreasing? Are they reflecting on their feedback? To give a picture of where students at their journey over time as well, being far more holistic than just simply a score. So that's a very quick summary from me. Just wanted to give a quick background to ourselves at Nurture. Lovely to speak to you all, folks, and I'll hand the baton back over to Paul to wrap things up on his end.
Thanks, David. So I'll let everyone get to the Q&A very shortly. So again, thank you again from Dave and to Dee. And finally, obviously, as I mentioned, I'm with my eAssessment hat on today, but look out for further information from us around our conference that takes place next June on the 6th and 7th in London. And look out for more opportunities to enter the eAssessment Awards. So obviously, we're open to multiple opportunities for you to submit applications for that. Visit the eAssessment website. And then now I will stop doing my advert and back to you, Brian.
Thanks, everybody. Really great stories, really fantastic awards program. I'll give another shout out. We were a second place award winner, but we consider ourselves an award winner during the first year of the eAssessment Awards. And it's a tremendous boost in not just confidence, but a sense of appreciation that you're on the right track when you get an eAssessment award. So it's a really great program. I do want to open it back up to all of our speakers and kind of go back up to the top and ask Timeri if you could comment. You're about making the connection, putting providers and educators in touch with each other. It feels to me like a privileged position to be in, because you no doubt also hear about some of those challenges in not just making the handshake, but making that handshake work and getting into implementation. I'm wondering, again, with the context of the theme of our conference being sort of the context for innovation, if you might share a story or two about some of the challenges that you've seen in getting past just the handshake, getting to implementation from either side of the equation, vendor or educator side. Are there any threads you're seeing, any common challenges you're seeing, or does it all feel like kind of a unique circumstance for each connection you make?
What's been interesting, and I'm sure this is no surprise to folks like Nurture or other organizations here that are actually selling solutions into schools. What I've found has been frustrating in my career as I've been doing that, and continues to be difficult, of course, is that educators are so busy. They're so, they don't have enough time ever. There's no moment in the year where they feel like they have extra time. And so They're trying to manage their day job of caring for the educators and the students in their care, and they either have budget for or have identified a need for help in a certain area. And so they want to find a solution, whether it's an ed tech tool or some other purchase that they want to make to improve instruction and learning. And meanwhile, the rest of us we're trying to let them know about our solutions all along and let them know that we're here and we're here to help. And then at the last minute, they need it, and they need to make the purchase, oh, by the way, by November 5th, because that's when the budget runs out, for example, right? And so you might hear about them today on November 3rd, and they need a quote right now, and they need, and maybe throughout the last however period of time, they've kind of vetted and looked at different possibilities. But I think it's tough for us. We have to be ready, and we do, to get them those quotes, and they might have ignored our emails and our phone calls for months, and now all of a sudden they need our attention and our solution right away. That has been one trend that we have seen at EdCuration, and maybe that was definitely true when I was selling curriculum into schools as well. And it continues to be true at EdCuration, where when they're ready now, and we have to be ready. And so that can be tough, especially I think for creators of instructional materials who are passionate, like everyone speaking today, they're passionate about the problem that they're solving in education and the way that they're helping learning improve. And it can be hard to have to stop everything and make a quote for the Minneapolis Public Schools that wants to buy this tool right now. But we have to do that. And we do hear from educators sometimes that they're not getting response from some of the providers that they're reaching out to and wanting to purchase from. And so we help with that as well. It's because we all really don't have enough time to do all the things that we're attempting to do. But that's definitely one trend that we see, is that we don't always have good shoppers and good buyers that are engaging with us over time. Sometimes it's the last minute.
That sounds familiar with life in general, but it sounds like the more work we can do to, as you said, be ready, prepare, and be on that runway, so that as they get closer to the end, we're sort of ready. Kevin, I want to go to you. There's a question in the chat, which I want to encourage you to answer in the chat, because I have one of my own. But you are also in a kind of a privileged position, being an entirely online university. And again, wondering about sort of the context of innovation. Are there unique opportunities you think you have by being in that situation to try things out, to run tests, that sort of thing? And also unique challenges that you have being an online university, because we've heard throughout the conference, we're mostly about the digital assessment, but we've also heard a lot of, in-class sort of things that happen, and you don't have that opportunity. So I wonder if you can kind of speak to the opportunities and challenges you have as a full online university.
Sure. Oh boy, where to start?
In 2 minutes or less.
Yeah. So, I think assessment security is one of the biggest nemeses that we face being fully online. We work with proctors, but there are still ways that assessment content can be stolen or breached or circulated. So that's just a major hurdle for us to contend with. In my presentation, we're looking for ways to innovate in, leverage technology to have high fidelity assessments that students feel are sort of socially valid, that, by participating in this assessment, I didn't just clear some sort of hurdle that, some arbitrary hurdle in order to get a degree, that they have produced something or done something that is meaningful to their career, that's meaningful to the industry. So, our performance assessments are really good at doing that, and we try to design intentionally so that they create a portfolio for them to show to potential employers. But then again, you know, I'm a bit of a psychometric geek, and I'm into measurement. I like the idea that it can be very precise, and we want to get information back from students from the assessments they take. So that's where our interest in machine scored performance tasks is coming in. Another problem or idea we're thinking about is how to do sort of longitudinal assessment. So how can we check in with a student throughout their learning journey in a way that is again, psychometrically valid and meaningful, right? So it's not just like tapping on their shoulder and being like, are you working on your project? What we want to think about is how can they show us their thought process? How can they show us their learning, and how can we put them in a position to recognize a challenge or recognize some sort of barrier to acquiring a skill, and then acquiring that skill and letting us know how they went through that. So lots of opportunities.
Excellent. We are just about at time. In fact, a little bit over. I want to close out with just another question of Paul. Could you mention what some of the other categories are that folks might be interested for those eAssessment awards?
Given the time, there are another eight categories. So I think the best thing is Matt has put a link in the chat. Matt's our CEO. So the best thing to do is go on that page, look at the categories, and look out for an email from us in the next over the next few months, looking at opportunities to submit your applications for next year.
Awesome. Yeah, I know it's a tremendous value, and I'm sure Dave and Dee will agree that tremendous value winning the award. Great thing to present to your researchers and potential customers. It's really really a huge advantage. So I want to thank everybody for another terrific session. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Ross again to introduce our closing keynote. Thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. A fascinating session. It's been a fascinating 3 days. Lots of thought-provoking stuff. Some really, really good case studies, some really good applications of tools to support learning, teaching, and training. And before they disappear completely, just a quick congratulations to Dee and David for winning the awards. Well done. And I sincerely hope we'll see you all again, which brings us on now to our closing session. Our keynote, Scott McLeod. Hello, Scott. Good to see you. And very impressive set of books in the background.
Thanks, Jeff.
Not everything is digital, eh? As somebody who worked for 15 years for a publisher, it's always nice to see a library. Scott is widely recognised as one of the nation's leading experts on P12 school leadership, on deeper learning, on technology, on innovation in the educational sphere. He's a founding director of the UCA Centre for the Advanced Study of Technology Leadership, an interesting phrase in education, Castle, and he's co-created a widely popular video series, Did You Know? Shift Happens in brackets. Co-creator of 4Shift Protocol for Lesson Unit Design and founder of both the annual Iowa One-to-One Institute and EdCamp Iowa. And that's the official pen portrait, if you like. But also I highly recommend his Twitter account. And one little phrase right at the top of that, which I can't help but quote, if leaders don't get it, it's not going to happen. And I think that's quite a profound observation for life in general, I might add. Political, educational, all sorts of leadership. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Scott. I'll be back to field a few questions towards him. Please use the chat room, as we've been saying all afternoon. And without any further ado, as I've said before today, over to you, Scott.
Thank you very much for that kind intro, Jeff. I don't know if I would recommend people follow me on Twitter, but you know, the more the merrier, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit play here. Hopefully everybody sees the title slides. Somebody give me a shout out in the chat box that you can see title slide that says thinking about performance assessment.
You're good, Scott.
Yes, Scott.
All right, good. Hang on, somebody just changed the setting, so now I got to do that again. Okay, we still good?
You're good.
Sorry, we're going to do that one more time. Just because my screen's blinked on me. All right, cool. So as Jeff mentioned, I'm a professor of school leadership at the University of Colorado, Denver. I work with principals, heads of school, superintendents of school districts, whoever's interested in sort of, leading schools, transforming schools, and so on. And as also mentioned, I'm the founding director of a center called CASTLE, not the social emotional learning castle, which many educators are familiar with, but a center spelled like the medieval castle that's really the only university center in the country focused on leadership and innovation and deeper learning and technology and so on. So I appreciate the invite to spend some time with you all today. I don't know if I have all the answers here today as we think about performance assessment, but hopefully I'll at least give you some thought-provoking things to sink your teeth into. And I'm going to actually start our time together by telling you 4 stories from Colorado, which is where I live here in the US. And as we go along, I'm going to invite you to throw your notices and your wonders into the chat box, and we'll kind of go through those as we go along. So first notice or one, whoops, hang on, crap. So first story from Colorado is about sharks. Now, that might feel like a funny story to start with in Colorado. If you know where Colorado is, geographically, we're not anywhere near where sharks are. But have some students in one of our more innovative school districts in Colorado, the St. Vrain Valley School District, that got invited to participate in a project relating to sharks. So we're going to start this school story by just having you watch this video for a few seconds. Cool. Now, the question that I have for you is not, would you get in the shark cage, but rather, how long was the shark? Now, that's an interesting question to ponder in a lot of ways, right? Like, how would you even go about measuring the shark? For example, the shark is not staying still. The water is very murky. There are no reference points out there to, calibrate against and so on. So I'm going to give you about 45 seconds to throw in the chat area your thoughts about how you might measure the shark. Go. Okay, answers are starting to roll in. Nice. All right, cool. Some good ideas rolling in. Very good, very good. All right, cool. So this was a real life problem that was faced by an organization here based here in Boulder, Colorado. We had a marine biologist who was studying sharks. She worked for an organization called Oceans First, and thanks, Juan. She enlisted some high school students to help with this project. And what you see here in the picture is what they finally came up with. So this device is actually upside down. The handle is pointing up, but what you see on the end is you see 2 lasers. And on the bottom of the picture is a GoPro mount where you could attach a GoPro camera. And the basic idea here was that using images of sharks on walls, right, you could calibrate the device for various lengths and make sure that it was measuring correctly with the lasers, and then complete with the GoPro camera, you could take video and of course then extract still photos out of that are digital. And the bottom line is that you could then take one of those images from the camera and you could use the lasers to identify endpoints and calibrate the length and so on. So very interesting project. Everything was calibrated beforehand and then it was sent down, into the ocean, worked like a champ. And the first question that I'm going to invite you to think about for about a minute or so is, what knowledge, skills, and competencies and dispositions were these students gaining in this work, and how might we assess those? See you in a minute. All right, thanks for your ideas in there. I saw lots of identification about what knowledge, skills, and dispositions students might be learning as part of this process. What I did not see from you all was how we might assess those. So I'm going to invite you to keep thinking about that as I head into my second story. Second story is really about a Genius Hour project in Boulder, Colorado. The Genius Hour project had a couple of phases. Phase one was an inquiry phase, where 2 fifth grade teachers invited their students to dive into whatever they wanted to know more about, right? And as you can see from the poster papers here, ideas ranged widely, everything from Taylor Swift to the Galapagos Islands, South America to the Olympics, and so on. Okay, and so the basic directions for these 10-year-olds were: learn whatever you want about your topic, be ready to share with us in a few days about what you learned. And the teachers said, we don't want you to just make a digital slide deck. We want you to have some kind of physical representation of what you're learning. So the project started on a Thursday. They came back on a Monday to share out what they had learned. They worked on this for 3 days. And as you can see, they had sort of a 2-phase exhibition. The first phase was where the 5th graders exhibited to the younger students in the school about what was going on. And then they also had a block of time where parents and the community come in and also learn about their topics. Topics range widely, as you saw from the list, everything from the mosques and Ramadan to, optical illusions in the observable universe, to one of my favorite inquiry questions ever: which airplane is ultimately better, the A380 or the 747-8? Right? I know that's a question that's been keeping you all up at night. Phase 2 of the project happened later in the year, where they then came back and said, all right, that topic that you were working on, there's some issues and challenges and concerns related to that. So we're going to teach you a little bit as 10-year-olds about the design thinking process. We want you to identify particular issues, problems, and challenges related to that topic, and we want you to prototype a solution. So we had sort of a 3-day phase 1 and a 3-day phase 2. Focused on inquiry topics of students choosing as part of this deep dive Genius Hour experience. And again, I'm going to invite you to throw into the chat for about the next minute: what knowledge, skills, competencies, and dispositions were these students gaining, and how might we assess those? Thank you, John. Thank you, Walter. Ideas are starting to roll in. What are students getting out of this experience? How might we assess what they're getting? Okay, oh, very interesting. Thank you, Travis. Okay. Let's roll into story number 3 as we keep thinking about that. Oh, very nice, Mark. Thanks for that contribution. Okay, thank you, Walter. Story number 3 is really about space. If you go to Lakewood High School, which is west of Denver, Colorado, you might run into this kid. He and his team are working on this harness that they created and built themselves. This harness is meant to be water repellent, and as you'll notice, it has a bunch of straps and rings on it and so on. And what they're trying to do here is they're trying to figure out how can astronauts stay fit and healthy up in space. An interesting challenge because, of course, we can't take a set of weights up into space, into the International Space Station, because, you know, every gram counts. And there's also not a lot of room. Like, we can't put a big running track in or whatever. So what you see here is that you'll see a strap that runs from the student's chest down through the legs and up the back, and you can attach a D-ring to that, and the student is demonstrating how you could connect that D-ring to a tension cable that was mounted in the floor or the wall or the ceiling, whatever, and you could exercise different parts of the body through resistance training just by attaching it to different parts of the harness, which hopefully is water repellent and sweat proof as you do this work up in space. So very interesting design challenge that these kids are trying to tackle, and Lakewood High School is part of NASA's HUNCH program, where they try to design space-oriented solutions that help us figure out how to navigate up, you know, above the atmosphere. Here's another group's project. They're working on a t-shirt washer, a sort of a collapsible fabric/metal bucket. You can see that it's got various lights attached in it as well, and filters. And basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out how can we wash a t-shirt in some minuscule amount of water, like 10 milliliters, plus a little bit of radiation, plus a little bit of chemicals, right? And so they're testing their titanium dioxide ultraviolet radiation combos to see what works best for fighting bacteria buildup in somebody's t-shirt that they've worn all day up in space. And once again, I'm going to invite you to think about what knowledge, skills, competencies, and dispositions are these kids gaining in these kinds of space-oriented experiences, and how might we assess those? Cool. Thank you, Karen. Give you another 15, 20 seconds or so to throw your thoughts in about how are we going to assess this kind of work by students before I show you my 4th example. Nice, nice. Cool. Story number 4 is really about a smart summer, going back to that school district that I started with in Longmont, Colorado. Every summer they run innovation academies for younger children at the elementary level. And the basic idea here is that they're going to take a bunch of young kids, elementary level. They're going to pair them up with the company IBM as a corporate partner in the work, because there's an IBM campus right down the road. And they're going to teach all these kids about design thinking as part of the summer academy. And so the way this works is that in week 1, the kindergartner through 2nd graders would go to the IBM campus, and they would learn about various things that IBM is working on, like smart cities and smart energy and smart transportation, right? And then in week 2, the grades 3 through 5 kids, the 8 through 10-year-olds, will go to IBM, and the kindergarten through 2nd graders will then slide over to one of the school district buildings to work on solutioning, right? And basically try to figure out how do we create societal solutions for the things that we just heard about at IBM the week before. And so, you know, when you go to the solutioning phase and you go to like the innovation center for the school district, you just see boxes and boxes and crates of various supplies, everything from egg cartons to, you know, paper clips, rubber bands, tape, glue, you know, anything that you can, you know, styrofoam balls, pipe cleaners, anything you can think of to work with. And you can just see these kids are just deep, deep into the building process, the prototyping process, the solution process. Every day while they're in the academy, they're also maybe talking about big ideas, like what's the math connection to solar energy? What's the math connection to public spaces, right? And so on. Here's some of the students' creations as they start designing, right? Here's some kind of solar powered green space. This looks like some kind of smart park or smart city installation. This is a hot mess. I don't know exactly what kids are building here, but you can see that there's got a lot going on there. This again looks like some kind of solar powered lift activity that they're building. Here are the wind pushers. They're proudly sharing their projects as they think about wind energy and what they're working on. These guys are great. They were working on smart energy, and they were very eager to tell me about how one lightning strike equals 1 billion joules of energy. And if we just had enough lightning towers like the one they were building all around the world that were connected to batteries that could power the world and take care of all our energy needs and all the good stuff, right? And throughout the process, they have to, you know, show what they're learning and what they're doing. They have to present that publicly to others. And so as you walk around the solutioning phase, you will see diagrams like this up on all the whiteboards and young learners standing in front of them describing what they've learned and what the solutions are for these critical societal problems, like how do we improve transportation, how do we improve human-city interactions, how do we improve our energy needs, and similar challenges that IBM adults are working on in their professional settings. So one last time, as you think about these summer academies and these young learners, what knowledge, skills, competencies, and dispositions are they gaining, and how might we assess all of this? Last round. All right, cool. So as you can see, all of this is very complex learning work. And, you know, the umbrella term for much of this kind of learning these days is deeper learning. You know, everybody's got their own take on what deeper learning means, but we see these kinds of terms very frequently in school district profiles of a graduate, learner profiles, vision and mission statements, and so on, right? So, you know, you might see very creative Trivial Pursuit, pie wheel type places, and so on, that describe what they want their student outcomes to be. You might see some kind of compass from a school district, or a fan, or, you know, a diamond shape. This is the Roanoke County Public Schools in Virginia. They've got 8 C's. I'm like, ooh, friends, that's a lot of C's that we want out of our kids, right? And so on. So basically the schools that I work with are focused on these 4 big shifts. It's the shifts around higher level thinking, right? How do we up the cognitive complexity of kids' day-to-day work so that they're engaged in deep, rich critical thinking and problem solving, like in the examples that I just showed you, not just factual recall and procedure regurgitation. How do we enable learning experiences that have really high levels of student agency and ownership and self-directed learning? How do we connect those experiences to real world authentic context, like what I just showed you? And how do we use technology in meaningful ways to facilitate those first three, right? There's lots of reasons why we need these deeper learning experiences. I'll just run through several of them very quickly here. One of them is just simply engagement. You know, the data in the US are horrific, for example, that, you know, the folks who do the Gallup polls for us survey almost 1 million kids and tell us that, you know, we've already lost 1 out of 4 kids by 5th grade, who tells us that their learning isn't interesting anymore. By the time you get up to high school, you're lucky if 1 out of 3 secondary students says, yes, my learning is interesting at school. And it's no wonder why. They ask follow-up questions. Are you learning anything interesting? Are you having fun? Are you getting to do what you do best? And the answers over and over again are no, no, no. What we're finding is that our traditional emphases on factual recall and procedure regurgitation and the way that we teach those are increasingly uninspiring to many of our students, and particularly in contrast to how they learn about things at home, right? So if a kid is lucky enough to have internet access and a computing device at home, which increasingly most of our students do, they've sort of tasted the honey because at home they get to learn about what they want, when they want, where they want. They can go in any direction that they want. They can learn with others who can help them broaden their knowledge around that. They can make things, they can share things, they can contribute to larger communities that are also passionate and interested about that. And so they have all those experiences at home about whatever topic they're learning about, right? They can shift gears at any time, and then they come to school and they rarely get to do any of that. And then we wonder why they're bored and apathetic about their learning. Another reason why these deeper learning experiences are, you know, a lot of schools are leaning into them is because you may have recognized that we have a new information landscape these days. And unfortunately, it's having the same major impacts on society that the printing press did. And, you know, if the characteristics of our old analog information landscape are on the left, and our characteristics of our new digital hyper-connected global information landscape are on the right, it's very, very difficult to find a school that is preparing students well for the right side of this slide. And so one of the best ways to help students become information literate and technology fluent is to immerse them in real world contexts where they have to learn those skills in embedded, authentic ways to solve authentic challenges, which is very different, for example, from using the school's classroom management system to submit a digital worksheet. Another reason why schools are moving in these directions is around career readiness. We know that we've experienced just tens of millions of job losses due to major factors like offshoring and outsourcing and automation. And here in the US, for example, the end result is that if you are working in a job that requires non-routine mental work, either analytical work, the blue line, or interpersonal social work, the green line, then the number of jobs available to you has risen steadily over the last few years. But if you're involved in any kind of routine mental labor job or any kind of manual work job, the number of jobs available to you have remained stagnant or gone down steadily over the last few decades. It's what we call the bifurcation of the American economy. If you have those upper level thinking and social skills, then the number of jobs available to you continues to increase and pay well. Everybody else is fighting for existence and maybe trying to stay above minimum wage. And we know exactly what those blue and green lines look like. They look like this set of skills right here, these deeper learning competencies that I talked about before that are reflected in many school districts and schools' vision statements and learner profiles. Unfortunately, research tends to show us that when you walk down the halls of most schools and you look at day-to-day work that kids do, about 80 to 85% of it is low-level mental work. It's this stuff. And unfortunately, from an economic standpoint, that kind of work increasingly isn't paying off for our graduates. There's an equity component to all of this. We know that in many schools, some students get to build rockets, some kids get to build robots, some kids get to code or play around with green screen and other multimedia technologies, or to draw from the examples that I gave you before. They get to work on real world projects around sharks or space. They get to design and build. They get to, you know, follow interests that are that they're passionate about, and so on. And then there are the other kids who are subject to individual tutoring and remediation. They're filling out worksheets so they can catch up for the state exam. Maybe we shove them in front of a computerized adaptive software and assessment tool, and so on. And unfortunately, it's that second group of kids that traditionally are low achieving, kids of color, kids in poverty, kids who speak a primary language other than English, kids who have a disability. In other words, the same kids who have been underserved traditionally by schools continue to be underserved in these deeper learning spaces. And so we have some serious equity issues around who gets to be prepared for life readiness and who doesn't. And unfortunately, the same kids and families that are traditionally advantaged maintain that advantage in these new deeper learning opportunities because other kids simply don't get them. One final reason why a lot of schools are moving towards these deeper learning experiences is simply because of relevance, right? If society around schools is changing quite rapidly and schools change much slower, that creates relevance gaps between what society and our graduates need from us and what we are actually able to provide as education systems. And so we're trying to lean into these deep, richer, more robust learning experiences to close some of those relevance gaps. Now, we still need kids to know and be able to do stuff. I'm not arguing against facts. I'm not arguing against procedural knowledge, right? We still need that stuff in schools, and we also know that covering academic content and preparing students for life success are not the same thing. So since this is an assessment conference, I think these kinds of learning experiences raise some really strong and difficult challenges for us around how do we assess the amorphous and the fuzzy? How do we assess the divergent and the different? How do we assess the personalized and the personal? How do we assess the deeper and more robust learning that I've been trying to show you? How do we assess, wow, that's amazing, right? When you see kids do really cool work. And I think that's a little different than, say, the machine scored performance assessments that Kevin was discussing at the end of the previous session, right? You know, as you look at sort of this community embedded, place-based work, you know, where kids are tackling authentic real world problems, they're using authentic real world tools, they're engaged in much more cognitively complex, but also amorphous and fuzzy and divergent work, right? It looks like authentic assessments and other kind of performance assessments. It looks like portfolios. It looks like defenses before panels of experts. It looks like exhibitions to the community and so on. And a lot of that's going to be rubric based rather than numerically based or score based. So for instance, if you go to One Stone in Boise, Idaho, they have this wonderful set of bold learning objectives. They call it the blob, right? And One Stone is centered around student agency there in the middle. How do we center ourselves around student voice? And then you can see all the different outcomes they're trying to achieve with kids in the corners. And then what they do is they match that up with rubrics and a growth transcript. So for every single one of those things in each corner, we can say your student is emerging, developing, proficient, advanced, and so on. And the goal, of course, is by graduation to get every kid into at least the proficient bar on sort of those more amorphous outcomes that we're looking for. Similarly, if you go to schools in the New Tech Network, you know, they have, you know, a couple hundred schools around the globe these days, and they're primarily in project-based learning modalities. And for any project that kids are working on, about 60% of the grade is content mastery. It's assessed in fairly traditional ways like tests and essays and so on. But the other 40% is focused on what they call school-wide learning outcomes. So what New Tech Network says is that in addition to the academic content that we want kids to know, we want them to have strong work ethic, to be great collaborators, to be great speakers and writers, to be tech proficient, to be good thinkers, and so on. And then here are some example rubrics that they've created. I picked the grade 10 level, which is about age 16, just to show you what these look like, right? Where they say, here's a knowledge and thinking rubric for science, argumentation and explanation, right? And you can see that they're trying to create rubrics that they can rate student work against to say, how do we know when a kid is proficient in that knowledge and thinking work around science, right? Similarly, here's a rubric for English language arts at the grade 10 level around, you know, writing in English, around argumentation and explaining things. Here's a written communication rubric and so on. And then all of those rubric scores get converted into grade categories in the electronic grade book so that students can see not just how they're doing on their academic content, but also on these other school-wide learning outcomes that they're working on. Okay, so we're pushing near the end of my time, and I know we started a little bit late, so I'll kind of wrap all this up. You know, my buddy Will Richardson likes to ask people, under what conditions do people learn most productively? And that might be at school, but that might also be at home, at work, out on the rural, whatever. And they routinely say these things in orange. And what they never, ever, ever say about what it means to be a productive learner or how they are a productive learner is they never say this stuff in black, right? And so I think one of the challenges for us over the next decade or so is to really figure out, how do we reconcile the black versus the orange, right? How do we start moving toward the left on this slide and creating more rich, robust, deeper learning experiences for kids that are more engaging, that provides them with a different kind of mental work that still allows them to accomplish, critical knowledge and procedures that we need them to have, and so on. Ultimately, we have to ask ourselves, what do we want out of our kids? Do we want graduates who are and students who are recipients of pre-made, pre-packaged information that gets delivered to them through a standardized curricula and standardized assessments? Or do we want students who are bakers and makers and creators and doers, who are actively engaged in their learning and who are doing awesome things that hopefully make a difference in the world? So ultimately, we have to ask ourselves, what do we want all of our students and graduates to be, not just some, and what are we actually willing to do to get them? So I'm going to close with a fifth story from Colorado about frogs. This is Lake Titicaca in Peru. It's about 12,500 feet above sea level. As you can see, it's a long, long way from Colorado. And unfortunately, the wild frog population in the lake has declined about 80% over the last 3 generations. It's now classified as critically endangered due to the pollution efforts that are that's occurring from the local citizens down there. Scientists at the Denver Zoo are working with their scientific colleagues in Peru trying to preserve the species. They caught wind of the shark project, and they invited high school students to participate in this frog preservation project as well. One of the challenges around collecting data on these frogs is that it's very difficult to go underwater and collect data in the frog's native environment of the water, because diving at altitude is very different from diving at sea level, right? The compression tables are very different. You get increased decompression stress on divers at high altitude. The basic rule of thumb is that if you're diving at high altitude, you stay shallow and you keep it short to limit the amount of accumulated gas in your tissue, which limits the possibilities for scientists to collect data. So the school district initiated an aquatic robotics project. You can see this giant fish tank where they test their solutions, right? And it may be a surface level robot like the one you see here in yellow and red. That goes across the surface collecting various types of data, or it might be an underwater robot like the white one you see on the left that goes deeper underwater. It can stay under longer than a scuba diver can and collect whatever data the scientists need. In addition to the robotics component of this project, students are also engaged in frog conservation messaging and amphibian education activities, including a Spanish language comic book that explains the science to the locals and why they should care. And what's great about this project is that they enlisted a number of students who are native Spanish speakers so that they can converse directly and troubleshoot with the scientists down in Peru remotely instead of having to do the translation all the time. In other words, that project is a wow. And so, this kind of learning doesn't happen as often as we probably should make happen in schools. And one of the reasons is because we're having trouble getting past our fears, our control needs, our assumptions about what student learning should look like, the basic historical inertia about how schools operate, and all the yes buts, right? And unfortunately, our new visions of student possibility haven't outweighed those yet, but the bottom line is that if we want student learning change, we must change teaching, we must change schooling. And the biggest barrier to that is not policies or testing or funding or technology. It's our deeply rooted communal mindsets of what school should look like. So I'm going to invite you, as you think about the kind of learning that I put in front of you today, to think about, do you want more of this kind of learning for your own young people in your own community? And if so, not only how do we enable it instructionally, but how do we assess it? And how do we lean into that important assessment work so that we can get at the wow and the amazing? And I think that's important work for all of us to lean into, and I hope that you'll join me as we go along. Thank you very much.
And well, if I may echo the meme, wow, thank you, Scott. Amazing amount of territory covered in that. Lots and lots and lots of things for us to pick up on. The clock has rather defeated us, I'm afraid to say, but you can see from the chat that we're getting some really positive feedback. I dare say you're happy to engage with everybody separately on social media or through the usual contact medium. Your presentation, like all the presentations this week, has been filmed. We'll be making that available through our website and through YouTube. And I, for one, will be watching it again And I look forward to trying to answer that question. How do we reconcile the black and the orange? That's it's almost a fundamental question, I think, for the next 10, 15, 20 years and probably beyond. So thank you ever so much, Scott. Really appreciate all your efforts, all your time, all the ideas. And the compliments are still flowing. So with that, we come to the end, I'm afraid. 3 days of amazing stuff. Breathtaking, I think would be fair to say. We've done the whole range of things. So I'm just going to invite Brian and my colleague Christine to join us so that we can wave you farewell. And where is Christine? She's being modest.
I think she's coming.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Without going on, the VAD details of the feedback form, we'll send you a copy. We really do want your ideas and your input. They help us frame the conferences for the future in terms of format, content, context, ideas, and so on. If anybody thinks they have a good case study or a good idea that they want to share with the community, you've seen what we're at for the last 3 days. We're interested in hearing from you. We'll be inviting you. We'll be back, no doubt, next year, probably twice, a shortened webinar and a longer conference again. And we look forward to engaging with you all in the future. Anything you want to add, Brian?
Just appreciation for your efforts, for Christina's efforts, and yeah, hope that,
here she comes.
Hope folks stay in touch in the near term. We will be working to get the videos posted, the presentations posted as well, and hopefully you'll share those far and wide. And that's it for me. Christina, anything from you?
No, thank you everyone for attending. Much thanks to all the speakers who participated. I think this was one of our best events so far content-wise. So I will be working to get all of the presentations edited and uploaded to YouTube as soon as possible. And so registrants can keep an eye out in your email for those links within the next few days.
And, a final thanks also to our sponsors, TAL, Assessment Tomorrow, Certified, Retta, Civica, Cero, and Surpass Community.
Okay, everybody. And in view of Sheila, who's probably up nearly to midnight, I would imagine it is in Mauritius at the moment, and my colleagues actually in India that were watching earlier where it's past midnight now, I wish you all a bon voyage and see you again next year. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.